go ahead and get into the NFL. I obviously want to start off with a team that's been doing great towards the second half of the season. Okay, that's an unbiased opinion. I think everyone would agree. The Steelers beat the Browns 27-14 to move on to 10-3. In that game, Wilson threw for 158 yards, which is not that impressive, but it was a pretty conservative game. He had 2 touchdowns. The real stat line here was Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren combining for 100 yards, and Najee had a touchdown. And the Steelers' defense only gave up 2 touchdowns, one in the first half, one in the second half, and they had 3 sacks and 2 interceptions. The Browns' defense, obviously they gave up 27 points, 2 of those field goals with 3 touchdowns. But they only had 1 sack, no turnovers. And that 1 sack was by Myles Garrett. I mean, he's the reigning defensive player of the year. Obviously, you're not going to be able to hold him the entire game. But obviously, they had a way better game plan for Garrett in this game than they did in the last game. Which, last game, I mean, we kind of talked about it. George Pickens even said it in his post-game interview. Like, the Browns really suck. They just beat them because of the weather conditions. The last game that we had, which was in Cleveland, it was a freaking blizzard out there.
It was.
And so it was pretty sloppy ball, and they ended up beating us. Yeah, it's fun to watch for sure.
We
but
have Captain Positive on the other side for their quarterback.
But, I mean, if you're going to have a team that shouldn't be beating you, those are the conditions for a team like that. And I think the Browns coming back to the Steelers stadium and, with decent weather for the most part, the Steelers showed them that it was more of a fluke that they beat us the first time. That's why we handled them the second time. So, I mean, the Steelers' upcoming stretch, 4 games left.
Tough. Very tough.
So, first up, this next week, we have the Eagles. After the Eagles, we have the Ravens. After the Ravens, the Chiefs. So, those are the 3 hard games. And then we take on the Bengals, which we usually always have the Bengals number, but you can never really count them out because that's a shootout type of game. So our offense is going to have to get it going, and we know our defense is going to show up. But the question is, will our offense show up? That's always the question. But with the Eagles, I mean, the Eagles, they've been winning, yes, but they've had a little turbulence. And the most recent news coming out of that locker room is how the wide receivers, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, they're not necessarily happy with Jalen Hurts. And it's because he's not necessarily seeing them open down the field. He's not necessarily getting them the ball for every opportunity they have to do so. But you have a Saquon Barkley on your team. I mean, I don't know. I really don't want to touch the drama of what's going on in the Eagles locker room right now. Eagle fans are calling for Jalen Hurts to get traded. They don't necessarily want him anymore.
Jeez.
I think with all of that turbulence going on, Steelers have a decent shot at beating them this week. And, I mean, we're still on fire. Our offense is showing up every week. Our defense, if there is a defense that's going to stop, and that goes for these other games too. Obviously, we always have the Ravens number. Even though they're a good team, always have the Bengals number. But when it comes to the Eagles and it comes to the Chiefs, these 2 teams are very high-powered when it comes to their offense. Now, the Chiefs, they're just weird. I mean, they just find ways to win games. Sometimes their defense steps up. Sometimes it is the offense. But I think if there's a team in the entire league that can beat those teams, it is the Steelers. So I'm still fairly confident going forward.
Most people, though, when they look at that schedule, I will tell you, most teams could easily go 0-4 in that route. I mean, play the Eagles are tough, Ravens are tough, Chiefs are tough, Bengals, they just score a lot of points, and Burrow's having an unbelievable season.
Most teams, but yeah. Steelers aren't most teams this year.
And that's the question, is can they make a good run at the end to really put themselves in a great spot for the playoffs? Or will they hiccup a few of these, and that really kind of puts them at that 5 or 6 or 7 spot, and that doesn't really benefit them as much. That'll be interesting. Interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, like I said, I have faith. I agree with you. Most teams in the NFL, they could go, I would say, 3-1. The Bengals are a pretty easy team. I think, according to the rest of... I mean, the Cowboys almost beat them the other night, which we'll get into here in a second. But the Eagles, the Ravens, and the Chiefs... The Ravens, we always have their numbers, so with that one, I'm a lot more confident. But the main two I'm looking at, the Eagles and the Chiefs. And I think we are like one of maybe 2 or 3 other teams in the NFL that have a solid shot at taking those teams out. So next up, let's go ahead and talk about the Bills game. So the Bills just lost to the Rams 44-42.
That's such a bizarre game, very high scoring. The stat that just blows my mind, well, there's 2. Let's just put it that way. Josh Allen scored all 6 touchdowns for the Bills.
So 3 rushing,
and 3 passing touchdowns, which is that's an incredible stat.
Superman.
Yep. And they tried to make a run at the very end. I mean, they had 21, I think, going into the fourth. Then they scored 21 in the fourth quarter. So, I mean, you saw the push, but it was just too late. And for whatever reason, they couldn't stop the Rams' offense.
Yeah.
I know Rams are good, but...
They're underrated for sure.
Yeah. But to score 44 on the Bills, I think that made the Bills look bad. I'll be honest with you. I think that makes people put in question, are they going to make the run that everybody's thinking they're going to?
Yeah. I mean, the other stat right here that stuck out to me is NFL teams that score at least 6 touchdowns with 0 turnovers are 245-0 in the Super Bowl era, including playoffs. Until the Bills just made it 245-1.
So they had 0 turnovers, 6 touchdowns, and they still lost the game.
Now, that's a shootout if I've ever heard one.
Yeah. That's
definitely a shootout game. But that's a crazy stat. So, I mean, yeah. Does this show, does that Bills defense right now, are they showing other teams in the league that they are beatable? They're not the super team everyone thinks they are.
Yeah. Well, I think what you do if you're any other team that plays them the rest of the season is you go back and you watch the film on this game. What did the Rams do to hold them? Now, obviously, they still scored 42 points, so it's not like they just trounced them by any means, but still, you held them enough to where you could win the game. What did they do, and how did they hold them to it? And then you also watch, okay, but how in the world did he get 3 rushing touchdowns? Do you need to put a spy on him? You need to, contain. What do you got to do to keep him from getting that? Some of them, I think, were close yardage runs when they were in the red zone, but still, that shouldn't be happening with the quarterback. I mean, ever. In my opinion, you should be able to watch that and be able to adjust to that offense. But I don't know. I think it proves that they are beatable. I think it does throw up the question of how far they're going to make it in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see. We'll definitely have to see. I think that, it's easier said than done to keep Josh Allen, who's freaking 6'5", 240 pounds, and runs like a running back.
He's a big man.
He's trucking people. He's hurdling people. Man. I mean, he reminds me a lot of Cam Newton in his prime.
Yeah, I could see that.
It's like that's a hard takedown, hard obstacle to overcome. Yeah. And then finally, let's go ahead and get into what we mentioned before, this Cowboys game. They lost to the Bengals. They lost to the Bengals.
In a horrible way.
Yeah. So, game's tied near the end of the game. The Bengals punt the ball, right? When they punt the ball, a Cowboys player jumps, blocks the punt. Oh, amazing play. They're going to get the ball on their side of the field. They're going to run out the clock. They're going to kick the field goal. Cowboys win. Nope. After he blocks the punt, the ball trickles down the sideline, and a Cowboys player decides to try and pick it up, to try and run it back. Instead of, trying to fall on it or just getting away. You don't have to touch it. Yeah. If you don't touch it,
it's a dead ball.
It's a dead ball. Right. Bengals touch it. It's Cowboys' ball where it's placed.
Yeah.
He decides to pick up the ball, or at least try to pick up the ball. Fails at it. A Bengals player recovers. It is now the Bengals' ball. They go on to kick a field goal to win the game. I mean...
It's like Leon Lett all over again. Back in the Cowboys days. You probably don't remember that because you're too young, but similar situations. It's holiday game, and he goes down and he touches a ball that he shouldn't have and ends up losing the game for him. I mean, it's just stupid plays after stupid plays when it comes to the Cowboys. And I don't feel sorry for him one bit because we get tired of talking about him every single time. But the other point that we got to look at is the fact that Joe Burrow continues to have solid games. So same thing with Jamar Chase. Great offense. I mean, they're killing it. Like, these numbers are insane. 369 yards, 3 touchdowns for Burrow. Jamar Chase had 177 yards, 2 touchdowns. And yet you still only win by, what was it, by 7?
Yeah, they won by a touchdown, not a field goal.
27-20. So you have all those stats and numbers, and you're moving the ball, and you can score, and yet you're still only winning by 7. And most of their games have been that close. I think even all the ones that they've lost. Yeah. So the question is it really the Bengals defense is just that bad? I mean, they're just that bad. Reminds me almost of the Colts offense when Manning used to play, and we had unbelievable offense. So we had to outscore everybody because our defense couldn't do anything. So I mean, how does Burrow continue to put up these numbers but then struggle to win games?
Yeah, I mean, you got to put it on the defense of the Bengals to go ahead and up it. Now, obviously, I'm a Steelers fan, so I could care less if they make those improvements or not. I enjoy the fact that whenever the Steelers go in to take on the Bengals, it is a shootout that we are actually able to participate in, because if there's a weak point of the Steelers, it's the offense. Yeah. And so even the fact of last week when we had that shootout with them and we were able to outscore them somehow, I think that speaks to how bad that Bengals defense is. So, I mean, I feel bad for Joe Burrow. I feel bad for Jamar Chase. I think this offseason, the Bengals really have to hit the draft picks, hit the free agency, and make some changes on that defensive end. I mean, I can't even really name you any players on that defense. I know Hendrickson is a solid DN for him, but other than that, I think they have somebody at corner. I forget his name, but he used to play for the Steelers. I think they lost Jesse Bates, who was their all-pro safety. But other than that, I don't know him. I don't know anybody. I know a lot of players in the NFL, but when it comes to the Bengals defense, a lot of no-names over there. So I think it shows every week.
Yeah. You know what's even worse? Joe Burrow's house got broken into during that game.
Yeah, I saw that.
Did you see that?
Yeah.
Listen, I don't understand this. I don't make a bunch of money, but I would think if I'm making millions of dollars, I'm going to have ADT or whatever on all my windows, doors, and if somebody breaks in, it sets the alarm off and sends the police over.
Well, here's the thing.
Why do they not have that?
They did. There was actually a police officer that was stationed outside the home whenever it got burglarized. Yeah.
Well,
I didn't look too much into this. I was watching the Pat McAfee show and they were talking about it a little bit. You know, maybe that's a plug for you, Pat McAfee. You're welcome.
Yeah, you need it, obviously.
But they basically said that there was a police officer that was out front, and the burglar had broken into his bedroom window, like on the other side of the house. And they only stayed in the room. They like completely trashed the room. I think they tried to steal a TV or something. I might just be making that up, but
still no motion sensors on windows. I mean,
motion sensors?
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know.
I mean...
But, whenever it had happened, there was a woman inside the house, which I don't think it was like his wife or anybody in his family. There was somebody who was in the house. Yeah, and she called the cops and reported it immediately.
You know what the police officer was doing? He's probably watching the game.
Watching the Bengals game.
Watching the game.
Probably. But that's
needs to be fired.
That's something that's reoccurring. Patrick Mahomes had his house burglarized?
Yeah, multiple NFL players.
Yeah, that's been a thing. And, you know... It makes, if there's someone that you know who is rich and valuable and somehow you figure out where they live and you know Sunday during this time the Bengals are on the road to take on yada yada.
Yeah.
You know, it makes sense. But if you have all that money, you should be having an armed security guard on the premises of your household.
Guard dog, something.
Yeah. Something, for sure.
Great.
So that is crazy.